Hey everyone, welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Juliet Beauchamp and I'm here with Computerworld Executive Editor Ken Mingis and newly minted Macworld Executive Editor Michael Simon. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Today we're going to be diving into the rumored M1X chips in the allegedly forthcoming Macs. So if you have any questions, comments about it, be sure to leave a comment on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and we'll do our best to get to it during our live show. And if we don't get to it while we're live, we can always go back and answer your questions if you have anything specific that you're curious about. So Mike, Ken, thank you so much as always for joining me. So can we talk a little bit about where these rumors are leaking from and what this new M1X chip is going to look like?
We can, but before we do that, I just have to offer congratulations to Michael for being the new executive editor at Macworld. It's a big move for Mike and a big solid move for Macworld. Michael, how many staffers do you have now that you guys are covering Apple with?
Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Juliet. We have four, two in the US, Jason Cross and Roman Loyola, and two in the UK, Karen Kahn and David Price, and me.
And
so
you,
five
and
total.
you, because you write as well. Yeah, that's a good team. That's
and
great.
Someone thought it was crazy enough to give me the keys to this car. So we'll see where I take it.
We can't vouch for what happens next, but I think Macworld's in good hands, Michael. Seriously, congratulations. That's
very exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Even more exciting, however, I have to say, well, maybe not more, but maybe as exciting, are these reports this week about the upcoming Apple M1X chip. I think it was CPU Monkey had put out some pre-release numbers. I don't think this is like the final format or final form yet, but it looks like, I guess, Apple really is pushing ahead with the M1 family. And I think this would be something that would go in the upcoming, the rumored, expected, whatever, MacBook Pro 14, MacBook Pro 16, maybe the newest iMac later in the year. What do we think, Michael?
Yeah, well, first off, I do think that the M1 is done. Like, I don't think we're going to see
when you
another
say done,
Mac.
You mean we're not going to see it in anything else?
I don't think an M1, because
Okay.
they released the three that they released: the Air, the lower end MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini.
Yeah.
And that was about 3 months ago now. And that's kind of how, like the iPhone A14, like that's what they do. They have their products. And then I think, like the iPad, which sees a higher version of that same chip, usually X or Z, or always X or Z. It was X and now it was Z. I don't know, whatever they choose. I think the next round will be M1X or eventually M2. But I think first we'll see M1X. And as you say, MacBook Pro 14, 16, but the higher end versions of it. And probably that new iMac as well. And I think the speeds are going to be significantly higher. Like when you look at the A14 versus the A14X or A14Z, we haven't seen those yet. We'll look at the A13. Or A12. Is that the last? I think that was the last one. I don't think there was an A13X. There was the A12Z in last year's Pro. So
right.
we'll look at that. And when you speed test those, they're, it's a little bit quicker. Nothing that you're going to necessarily notice versus an iPhone. But I do think that these models, which will be more expensive, you look at the Mac Mini versus the iMac, two desktop consumer desktops, there's a big difference in price. MacBook Air versus the MacBook Pro 16, big difference in price. So I think they're going to be significantly faster. I think Apple's going to really play up those speeds, because the Air is incredibly fast, like ridiculously fast, more faster than anyone who's buying an Air needs. But when you take that leap to the 16-inch Pro, as you have when you bought one, it's a different type of buyer. So if Apple just gives them an M1X, which is a little bit faster, still plenty fast, I think those buyers are going to be looking for more. So I think we're going to see 20%, 25% speed boost over what's already insanely fast in the MacBook Air.
Well, just to to fill in the blanks a little bit, and again, these are these early benchmarks, so we don't know exactly if this is going to be what shows up later this year. Again, the assumption being that the new hardware would be out second half of the year. But I think according to CPU Monkey, what they were talking about was that the frequency 3.2 3.2 gigahertz, like 12 CPU cores. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
And the same thing, on the graphics side too. Multiple cores. I'm trying to remember if it was 12. It was a lot of cores on the GPU side as well. And when you match those two up with the integration that Apple's already done, you're going to be looking at some seriously fast professional hardware, professional laptops. And again, eventually iMacs and presumably Mac Pro and all that. Do we think that this means that Apple's going to be basically, it'll obviously be constantly iterating, but we think we're going to get a new chip every year, or like we've got the M1 in late 2020, the M1X theoretically coming in 21. So we go to the M1Z or the M2 in 2022 and go on from there, just like the iPhone.
I mean, it makes sense. The the M1 is based on the A14. I mean, it's essentially a faster version of the same fabrication process.
Yeah.
So if they're going to make an A15 for the iPhone, which we know because they do that every year, I think it's probably easier, in a sense, for them to take that design and make an M2 for next year's Mac than to go backwards and continue the M1 or to reiterate the M1. I think we'll see developments like we don't see now on the Mac. I mean, Intel gets Macs with Intel get stuck on Core i5 and Core i7 8th gen for years sometimes. I don't think we'll see that. I think Macs will be updated a lot faster now, somewhat unceremoniously. I think we'll see, the Mac Mini will get a new chip, a press release, nothing special, but I think a lot quicker than the 3 to 3 years or whatever they've been waiting for with those machines now.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point. Apple can now really
Right.
dictate how quickly it wants to update. It doesn't have to rely on Intel. I did think it interesting that, recently Intel was putting out some benchmarks and comparing the M1 to the Intel, and it was, let's be judicious and just say it was sort of selective as to how.
Yeah, I mean, listen, all benchmarks from companies are selective. Apple's are notoriously ridiculous. They'll show curves.
But Intel's look seriously selective on this one,
Yeah, I mean, Apple does their graphs and they don't even tell you what the X and the Y axis are. They all skew the results. But yeah, Intel's what's funny about that is, there's an old line of thinking that if you're being defensive in any way, it means you're scared. And I have to assume that even though Apple isn't a big part of Intel's their bottom line. Apple's, it's a small customer. When people see these speeds that Apple's able to deliver in a PC, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, why am I dealing with this? Why not maybe buy a Mac? Or what I think the real fear is, maybe I'll go get an AMD machine, which are faster than Intel's and are based on that same ARM architecture and can deliver the graphics that people aren't necessarily able to get from Intel.
Yeah, I mean, and what was interesting was that I think Intel was putting out some numbers that some of the chips that it was looking at would have 8 CPU cores, 8 GPU cores, and if the numbers we're seeing on the M1X are to be believed, and they seem credible at this point, I mean, that means Apple's sort of already lapped what Intel is touting now. And knowing Apple, it's going to be, pedal to the metal over the next few years as they just put some distance between it and Intel.
For sure. And like I said, I don't think Intel is concerned that people are going to flock to Macs en masse. I mean, PC users are PC users. There are reasons to stay with PC. Intel has a whole advertising line now that says, if you want to play Rocket League, you're on a PC, I mean, there are reasons, but Apple is so far advanced when it comes to chip design. I mean, Apple's on a 5 nanometer process. Intel's still on 10. So that's better efficiency, better speeds, but more cores. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing how Apple, they basically just stepped in and said, this is how it's done. And now Intel has to respond, and not just with benchmarks and with barbs across the fields. They have to respond in a real way.
They have to innovate
within the next year or two, or else they're going to get left behind.
Well, I mean, and that that goes to the point, the problem, if you will. One of the things that's held back Apple in, say, the last 5 years is that, Intel's had more and more trouble shrinking these chips down and keeping them both efficient, fast, and not, blazing hot. And, I'm not sure that I see anything in what Intel is doing right now that tells me they've solved those problems.
Yeah, I agree. They threatened 7 nanometer process for years, and then they keep delaying it and delaying and delaying it. And they clearly haven't been able, whatever the reason is that they haven't been able to deliver that. Qualcomm has it, Samsung makes a 5 nanometer processor for its phones. Again, phones and laptops are different, but the design, the architecture is there, and Intel is definitely bringing up the rear when it comes to that. And I mean, listen, Intel's a huge company. I have to assume they'll figure it out, but you don't know. This landscape is littered with giant companies who thought that they were too big to fail, that rested a little bit too long on their laurels, and said, we'll be okay. Just this week, people were pointing out, I think it was Volkswagen that said, we're not worried about Apple. Like, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you. I was just working on a story before this call that Apple is hiring people for 6G technology.
I saw that. Yeah, they're already moving well beyond
now,
5G. They're headed. They're like 5 years down the road.
That's what 10 years down the road. But that's what you have to do if you're going to be an innovator in any space. You have to look down the road, not next year, not the year after, 5-10 years, and get there. And that's what Apple did with its phone chips, and that's why it was able to pivot what seemed so quickly to a Mac chip, but it's not. We're talking about years of development.
This is 5, 7, 8 years we've been waiting for this chip to show up. It's been talked about for ever since the iPad arrived.
And it seems timely, and it seems like they just said, okay, here's the new Mac. But Apple, if they have one strength above all their other strengths, it's the ability to look down the line and fail 8 years out while they develop these things. They say 1,000 no's for every yes. That doesn't mean that they're not trying out all these no's before we get the yes. Mm-hmm. They fail a lot, I'm sure, things that we don't see, but they're so far ahead and they're so far, down the road that they can afford to do that. And we see with the iPhone, the iPad, Mac, all that stuff. Like that's the way they operate.
I was just going to say, I know this is slightly tangential. Don't let me interrupt, Juliet. Did you want to say something?
I was just about to jump in and say, first of all, you guys more than answered a question that I was going to chime in, which was basically, how's this comparing to Intel? But we do actually have a question from our LinkedIn audience that I'm going to propose to you guys right now. So this question is from LinkedIn. As a reminder to all our viewers on LinkedIn and YouTube, leave a comment or question in either comment section. I know they call them slightly different things on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we'll answer them live here. So here's the question. I am waiting for a 16-inch MacBook Pro with M1X. When will it get released? Mid-2021 or end of 2021? And does it support discrete GPU? A few questions in one.
I can give you an answer more on the release than I can on the discrete GPU, but I would guess fall, September, October. Michael, your thoughts?
I'm going to be a little more optimistic and say maybe WWDC-ish.
Oh, June-ish. Please let it be.
And
I would love that.
A discrete GPU looks unlikely for this round. They're still, based on the rumors, they're still working on that. However, their integrated GPUs are really good. So I wouldn't worry so much about that, particularly in a laptop. When we're talking about the iMac and the Mac Pro, that's a different story. But I don't think that Apple's M1X or whatever it is going to have any problem running the things you want to run on a 16-inch probe. I think June.
Sure.
That's my guess.
I do want to follow up on one thing you're saying. You make a very good point because, in the old days, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, the difference between integrated GPU and discrete GPU really was noticeable in terms of what you could do in gaming, video editing, things like that. The way Apple has basically wrapped this whole chip ecosystem together, and the way they both share memory and don't think of a discrete GPU as a huge selling point now if you're looking at a MacBook Pro. It's, there may be some high-end serious uses for it, but for the vast majority of buyers, the integrated GPU as Apple's going to do it and is doing it already with the current M1 chip, is going to meet your needs. I really believe that.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly when it comes to a laptop, a portable. You're not doing, there aren't like render farms with laptops. So when we talk about the higher end desktops, that's a different story, and they are working on a discrete GPU. But yeah, for what you're getting with the Pro, assuming there isn't one that's ready for this release, I think it'll be just as good as the Pro that's out there now with the what is it, the Radeon? I don't remember. With whatever's inside the 16-inch Pro now, it'll be extremely competitive and probably way better.
What makes you think June, Michael? Just curious. WWDC announced at WWDC, and
yeah, I think I just based on what I'm saying, we see first half of 2021. I've seen those rumors. It hasn't been updated in over a year now. People are waiting. Apple sold a lot of these Macs over Christmas, but they're not Pro machines. The 13-inch Pro isn't.
When you say these Macs, you mean the new M1 Macs?
New M1s, yeah.
The 13-inchers,
the Mini, the Air. They're consumer machines. The 13-inch Pro is a higher level consumer machine.
Yeah.
A professional Mac user, however that looks like, whether it's creative or just like a executive, whatever you're buying it for, that's not what you're looking for. So they have to get these machines out. I don't think they're going to wait till the fall. It needs more ports, it needs more RAM, it needs more power, a bigger screen. Like these are important things. That's a market that I'm sure the 16-inch Pro market has crashed, because unless you absolutely have to have one right now,
why the hell would you buy one?
You're going to wait. No. You're going to wait.
Yeah.
So they're keenly aware of that. I think it was smart to push the consumer products out first, but I think mid-year is my guess.
Go ahead, Juliet.
Well, we've got another question on topic from LinkedIn, and this viewer says, I'm using a 16-inch MacBook Pro right now, and more than happy to wait for an evolved M chip. Just want to know how much time it will take for Apple to release a 3-nanometer chip, and how much of a performance upgrade is it going to be over the current M1s, which I think is a great question.
It's a great question. We don't really know. We can look at the iPhone, the A13 was a 7-nanometer, the A14 is a 5-nanometer. It was about 15% increase in CPU performance. I mean, you can extrapolate a little bit. I don't know that 3-nanometer is on the horizon for this year. They just moved to 5-nanometer last year, so I'm assuming 2022, maybe even 2023.
Well, and the M1X is a 5-nanometer chip, so it's not. They haven't gone any further down. The big jump for the viewer who's using the current, I'm assuming that's the current 16-incher or relatively new. The big jump will be moving to the M1 or M1X chip. You'll see a much bigger jump moving from that Intel processor to the latest chip than you will from like the M1X to the M2 or the M1Z or whatever it's called next year, whenever Apple gets to 3 nanometers.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll be one of the leaders, but my guess is I'm going to say 2023 is when they'll roll out these. So that'll be what, the A6, A7. That'll be the A17. Sure. And the M3-ish. What are we? What year are we in? 2021. So 2 years. Yeah. So M3 maybe will be that would work out nicely, wouldn't it? 3 nanometers M3. Come on. I can write Apple's website.
You could be
already.
A marketing guy. You move from editorial to marketing. You've got a job. It's also interesting. I was just going to say real quick, one of the things about the laptops due out this year is I think we're looking at a form factor change. It's supposed to look a little bit more like the new iPhone, a little more squared off, slightly less rounded. I'll be interested to see, if actually Apple does something to specifically demarcate these as the seriously new MacBook Pros.
Yeah,
anyway,
they're overdue for a design. On the other hand, I mean, they're laptops. Like, what can you really do?
You walk around, you show it off.
No, it's not. I'm not that. I'm saying like what? Like what can you really change? It's a keyboard and a screen. I mean, it's like the iPhone. I mean, the iPhone 12 is really nice, but is it all that much different from the iPhone 11? A little bit. but they are allegedly due for a design refresh. The only thing I really want to see is a better webcam, slimmer bezels all around,
Yes.
and that's really it. Slimmer bezels and a better camera.
What's the camera
You've been begging
the
for
current
that camera.
on the current M1, the 13 inch? Is that a 720p still, or did they go to 1080?
No, they didn't change it at all. All they did was add
Isn't it 1080 and something? I thought I had seen that one of the
I think the
cameras had been
iMac has a
upgraded.
1080.
Yeah, okay, maybe
They added like AI stuff to make your face better. But
God knows I need more of that.
I mean, I think in fairness, no one needs a 4K webcam.
No,
It's not going to make your face look better. It's going to look. It's going to be too close.
You don't want that.
No one's looking for that. But just something that's not
1080p would be
from
fine.
I'd
be okay with
97
that.
maybe.
Yeah. So I've got one more question. This is just it echoes one of our viewers' questions, but if, like that viewer said, he's using a current 16-inch MacBook,
Which is a
not
great
the
machine,
M1
by the way.
is.
The
Yeah.
current
It is,
16-inch MacBook is a great machine.
I was going to say, if he's really waiting for this alleged M3 that you're saying, Mike, is maybe going to come out in 2023, that 16-inch MacBook, I mean, can that just carry him until he's getting
for another 2 years, no doubt. Yeah,
right.
The 16-inch MacBook Pro is like a $2,500 laptop, and it's great.
Yeah.
So in 2 years from now, what is it? Mac OS 17? I don't even know what we're on. Whatever it'll be.
We're at 11 now, aren't we?
What are we on now? Whatever the number is. Hold on, let me look.
11.
We're on 11. So 11.2.
So you're talking like 13, 14.
If they do those numbers, didn't they do it differently? It was 10.3, but whatever. We're getting into weeds here.
Yeah.
You'll be able
We've
to
gone down a
upgrade
cul-de-sac. Please pull us back, somebody.
Whatever the 2023 version of Mac OS is called, your Mac will be perfectly able to run it very well. Apps will work. Whatever new stuff is out there will work, and it will be fine.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. So that kind of brings me to another question that I'm curious about, which is, I know that we've discussed, I mean, ever since that there were these Apple Silicon rumors over the summer, I can remember like being in the exact studio that I was in. I know we're moving around a lot, and we were kind of discussing, who is this for? If you're looking to upgrade, why would you upgrade now? So I'm curious about all the people who maybe were like, I don't want the first generation Apple Silicon. Would the M1X be, but they're curious. They want something that has an Apple chip in it. Would an M1X Mac fit their needs or not necessarily their needs, their desires, and kind of what they're looking for if they want like the latest and greatest, but not the first one?
I mean, yeah, I think the reason why people would wait is because of early adoption fears like bugs and that honestly didn't really happen.
There haven't been any.
There wasn't much, little things here and there. They updated it to 11.2. I had some issues, small issues that haven't popped up again. Like, for example, my webcam would shut off here and there. That hasn't happened. But very, very minor stuff. Nothing detrimental. Nothing to the point where your battery was draining and your keyboard wasn't working. Like nothing like that. They rolled out pretty smoothly, and the M1X it'll be assuming that's what it's called, essentially the same thing, just faster. So and actually almost not a second generation per se, but it's not the newest. I mean, they whatever issues that might have come up with the M1 will have been ironed out by the time the M1X comes out. So I think they'd be fine. Yeah. And, along those lines, I wouldn't recommend anyone not buy one now if they want one. It's the ones that are out there. They're fantastic. I'm using a 13-inch and so is Ken. And I mean, it's great. Yeah. It's
you're surviving.
Yeah. It's a
great
through
until the 16-inch M1X
price.
gets here. Let's put it that way.
Well, Ken has all that executive editor money to upgrade every 6 months.
So do you.
Well, so do you.
Apparently, yeah.
All right. We have one more question, and I think we can wrap it up after this. And this is just sort of forward-facing MacBook questions in general. So this year, same guy who is curious about upgrading He says, some leaks are suggesting that Apple's going to bring back the SD card adapter and other ports. Is it really going to happen? And what about MagSafe? He misses the older MagSafe.
Michael?
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so the rumors suggest that this year is going to be the year that Apple fixes everything and brings back the SD card that we lost, I don't know, 4 years ago.
Right.
Brings back, more ports that they didn't have on the M1, which that we kind of expected. Maybe even brings back MagSafe. That is a rumor. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that would look like, and I have conflicting thoughts about that. I also miss MagSafe.
Ditto.
Mm-hmm.
However, USB-C is universal and very nice. So if Apple introduces another proprietary charger, I don't think that's a great thing. And I wouldn't love that. If they can figure out a way to incorporate MagSafe into USB-C somehow.
That's what I was going to ask.
With a dongle or something.
Could you do it? Yeah, right. Okay.
I'm totally on board with. The other thing is the rumors might be that this is an iPhone type MagSafe. And maybe there's a charging pad on the MacBook, and you can pop your iPhone to use your MacBook's charge. Like, rumors are they're vague because people are just, they hear things and they write about them. So it could be either of those things. I don't think that if Apple was to say, here's MagSafe again, and it's a new charger, a new connector only for the MacBook, I don't think that's a great move.
Yeah. It is admittedly frustrating if I need to be using a USB-C port and one of them's my charger.
I agree. We need more of them, and
You'll
the
definitely
16-inch
see
Pro
more
will have at least 4.
Yeah.
Right.
But do you think you're going to get a card slot, Mike?
Yeah, that's what they're saying, and that is the craziest, weirdest room. I use it all the time. I have a hub, and I use it for my camera.
Okay.
I never thought Apple would bring it back, but the rumors say that they will only on those higher end models, and people would love that. I don't know why they took it away. It's
Apple
has
been known to backtrack. Look what they did with the keyboards.
I mean, look at the keyboard.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't admit that the old one was terrible.
No, well, they don't have to. As long as they bring back what's better, I'll let them get away with it.
The other part of this is that the touch bar is allegedly going away on those models as well.
Speaking of something else I don't use very often.
Yeah, and I don't think
I love the touch bar.
See that I agree. If they do that, it's going to create issues with factions, if you will, because there are people who love the touch bar. I'm fairly indifferent to it. Like I don't mind it being there. I use it for some things.
It doesn't get in the way, but it doesn't really add anything to the experience.
That would shock me if they just said, "Here's your function keys back." That would be very surprising. I mean, that's basically an admission that 5 years of developing and pushing this thing on our MacBooks is wrong. And it also takes away that touch thing. Like there's a touch element on the Macs, which kind of bridges the gap between the iPhone and the Mac, and they would be taking that away. I would be shocked, but that's the rumor, is that the 16-inch Pro, and I guess the 14-inch Pro as well, that's also rumored, will have a card slot and no touch bar. So we'll see.
Crazy. Can't wait.
Yeah, it would be crazy. But maybe they'll make it a consumer thing. Maybe the Air and the lower end Pro will have the touch bar. That would be a complete reversal of the way they do it. They did it to start.
Sure.
And maybe they're realizing that it's more of a consumer thing, which makes sense. That pros have their ways and their keyboard shortcuts, and they use those function keys, whereas regular people, that's a terrible thing to say. People that don't use their computers for high end work, are more apt to adapt to that type of
totally.
computing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking just in my experience, just editing video, it would be really frustrating if someone then just removed the keys. But I don't edit video on my MacBook with a touch bar, so it doesn't really bother me that much. Makes a good point. We all knew what you were saying. All right. Well, thank you both so much for calling in and joining. Really exciting stuff. I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe June, like Mike's prophesizing.
I hope so. I hope he's right. I hope I'm wrong.
There we go. Well, thank you all so much for watching today. And if you were live and tuning in on LinkedIn or YouTube, we really appreciate it. If you had a question or comment that you didn't get to ask while we were streaming, just leave a comment below and I'll get back to you and answer whatever question you might have. Thank you again so much for watching. And if you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel over on YouTube, the IDG Tech Talk channel, if you're migrating over from LinkedIn to YouTube. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.